Welcome to the Homeschool Mom Chat. I hope you are having a lovely week. I'm Teresa. I'm the certified life coach, the homeschool mentor, graduated homeschool mom of 4 kiddos, and I'm here to help support you on your homeschool mom journey, to help you shed what's not working so you can show up in your homeschool and your mom life authentically, confidently, and purposefully. And today we're going to be talking about high school. Homeschool, high school. We're going to be talking with Barbara from let me see here. I'm going to try and actually put my glasses on here. Living for Dusk Homeschool. I'm going to have to ask you what that means, where that came from. So I'm here to support you in your homeschool journey. And my intention, the first Tuesday of every month, to have a discussion with someone about homeschool high school, because there is, in Vicki Tillman's and the Homeschool High School podcasts words, there is not one right way to homeschool high school. It's not a thing. If we are going to individualize our kids' homeschool when they're young, we should be doing it when they're older as well. So if we haven't met, I'm Teresa, and today I'm going to be introducing you to Barbara. So welcome to the Homeschool Mama Self-Care Instagram account, Barbara. Hey, so nice to officially meet you.
Yes, how are you today?
It's a busy day. How about you?
Yes, very busy as well.
Did you notice Instagram and Facebook were off for a bit? Or was it?
Yes, oh my goodness, that was so wild.
It was wild because I'm thinking I'm hacked. And then I'm talking to my virtual assistant, which is my graduated homeschool high school kiddo. And she was like, no, the internet says that it's just down. And I'm like, really? Okay. So then I headed over to my Patreon support group and I'm like, y'all don't have to deal with this whole whatever is going on, or the algorithm of social media or whatever. You've got me locked in here in the back pocket all the time. So that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
I'd love to hear, Barbara, a little bit about your homeschool journey and who you're presently homeschooling.
Yes, so we started in 2020 with all the things that came with that whole experience of that year. And I had actually homeschooled my older two a little bit for preschool, and then they went to a private school. And then when 2020 hit, virtual schooling just was not going to be a good fit for our family. And
Yeah.
so we decided to pull out those old cobwebs of homeschooling that I had and, made all the mistakes, did the full box curriculum, which didn't work. And then we focused on the open and go curriculum and just all the things. And our first year was pretty rocky.
Yeah.
And then we kind of got some of our footing the second year. And so I have a 4th grader now, a 7th grader, and a 9th grader. So I have
Nice.
a freshman. And
Yeah.
so that's where high school comes
Fantastic.
into play with all the questions. And I feel like we're navigating it okay, but there are definitely some down the line questions that I feel are a little bit ambiguous. You're not quite sure what path you want to go down. So I'm
Yeah.
very much a planner.
Yep.
And so I have like all the things planned, and I'm a very visual person. And so I like to see the things and make sure that I have them in front of me so that I can dot all my I's and cross all my T's, and then I
Yeah.
can throw everything out and start all over again
That's my
and
default
see what
setting.
works.
Yeah, I identify with that. I'm always like that, whether I'm in this coaching realm or I'm parenting or like literally anything. So I'm with you there. What have you been learning over the last few years from your high school or your homeschool experience?
Well, I definitely have been looking at, I've always tried to teach to my kids on
Yeah.
how they learn. When I was teaching them when they were really little, I realized that my older two learn very differently from each other.
Yeah.
And so I've always taken that into account, what
Yeah.
their preferences are. And so now that I have my third one in the mix, they're all three very different.
Yeah.
And so just modifying, bending, molding, and adjusting to the different preferences that they have is
Yeah.
something that I've definitely learned to kind of roll with.
Yeah.
because what works with one child absolutely does not work with another child.
Yeah.
And so, same thing with curriculum, what works with one doesn't work with another. And
Yeah.
so, I've learned in the beginning, curriculum was our um, barometer of everything. And now it's
Yeah.
just mainly a guide.
Yeah.
It just tells us, like, this is what you should learn this year.
Yeah.
And we kind of go off on all of our little rabbit trails that we want to throughout the year.
Yeah.
Because we do, even though we have all the lists and we have all of the schedules, because I am one that I like to schedule it out, I like to plan it
Yeah.
completely.
Me
And then
too.
I like to look at the present day.
Yeah.
Like, where are we today? Because we do have, so you had mentioned about the name of our homeschool.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you
Living
for showing
for
that.
Dusk came about actually in a doctor's office. My youngest was diagnosed with a chronic illness last year,
Oh,
and it was a devastating, you know, diagnosis. And when they explained to us that our youngest is photosensitive, that we're only able to spend 30 minutes of the day outside when
oh,
the sun is up. Um, I said to the doctor, so we're living for dusk, we're living for the sun to go down, and that just kind of stuck. And so that's basically what we are, is every single day we're living for dusk.
mm,
We're waiting for that sun to go down so that our youngest won't be affected by the sun and the photosensitivity.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's where that name came from.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And that I can imagine must have been a big shock wave.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And definitely homeschooling has allowed us to do all of the therapies,
Mm-hmm.
all of the doctor's appointments, everything that we have to do without
Yeah.
asking for permission,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
And so it gives us that freedom to really get into what we need to be doing for optimizing
Yeah.
health.
Beautiful. So you have that freedom to do that. And then you also have the freedom to do what you just said about what you've learned over the last few years to what I say, lean into child-led learning. And I say lean in because I really don't think there's one right way to do this homeschool thing. I think you can tell yourself there is and then be super frustrated that you're not doing it right or wonder if you can have a different child to replace the so it actually all works the way you want it to. But anyway, there isn't one right way. And just like you said, what you've learned in the last few years, that they're all different. And so then if they're all different, and you have to do the K to 9 or the preschool to 9 differently, guess what? Ditto for high school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, it doesn't have to be, you can do what everybody else is doing, which is either, conventional approach like the brick and mortar school, or you could be even traditionally homeschooling like what everybody else is choosing to do. And it's fine if it works for you, and it's fine if it works for your child, and if it's fine if it works for your educational values. It's not even fine, it's great. It's exactly as it should be. But if it isn't, then you have to ask yourself, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing? What's my intention for this education? Just like you are in K to 9.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes wading through homeschool, and especially now that we've gotten into the high school years, it's like having those dowsing rods out in the field, waiting to strike where the water is,
Yeah, good.
You're
We
trying to
use
think.
those. We actually use those rods to get a well on our property,
Oh,
and it worked.
that's awesome.
I
So
think they
you're
call
just,
it witching or something. We didn't believe in
yes.
it, but we were really glad it worked because it was an expensive drill.
Yes, that's good. But so you're trying to just find your north when you are homeschooling. And for my high schooler, we're kind of super eclectic.
Yep.
So we're doing some of the traditional things like our cores. We're doing our math, we're doing our language arts, we're doing our science, but I've pieced that
Yeah.
together. So we looked at the curriculums and we looked at the rigor in those curriculums, and it didn't fit what we were wanting.
Mm-hmm.
And so we took elements from the curriculum that we saw and we made it our own.
Yeah.
And so we added in living books for, the science that we're doing this year. And we're learning a lot of different science, a lot of different things that are interesting, that hold attention.
Yes.
I think that's so even though, sometimes, yeah, you have to do the hard things. You have
Yeah.
to, like math, if math is your hard thing.
Yeah.
And, and then of course, learning the histories and the geographies and social studies and those types of things. But then when we do have freedom, like in electives and those type of things, we can do more interest led. We can definitely focus more on um, skill building, life building, and those types of things rather than, well, it has to fit into these boxes and these parameters because this is what it says. I have here in front of me what our state says is kind of, the loose of what we have to follow, but at
Okay.
the same time we have leeway there where we can bend and mold and kind of fit in what we want for that. So I think we kind of do both, where we do a little bit of that traditional, but we also do a lot of interest led as
Interesting.
well.
As the coach, I'll just put my coach hat on. I sometimes go back and forth between coach and let's just hang out at the water cooler and talk, especially in this space, about what homeschool moms are doing and how they're serving the homeschool community. That's what I do here on Instagram. But in my coach realm, I would say, tell me why. And you can also say, hey, Teresa, I didn't sign up for coaching right now, so you can say that. But I would ask you, tell me why you have to do any of the things.
I think for mine, especially my older two, their goals right now are to go to university.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so
That's a
when
great reason to have to. I think that really is.
And so when we're looking at their future in university, we've looked at their
Yeah.
requirements because, we can mold our homeschool to us as much as we possibly can, which we do. But at the same time, there will be a time
Yeah.
when they will have to um, fill out applications, they'll have to
Yeah.
answer questions. And so that's definitely why we do it the way that we
Thank
do. And
thank
we're
you for sharing
trying.
that. Yeah. Because that is what I was thinking, is that it depends on the child in front of you. So what's the next step? Is there, if their aspiration is toward a college or a post-secondary degree, then what steps do they need to take in order to get to that place?
Mhm.
So say if you take your oldest right now, and FYI, 3 years in advance, I know from experience, that's a lot of time before they truly decide on their degree. And then the first year degree, typically people shift majors. 70 to 80, maybe it's 85% of first years will shift majors. So really locking into one program and saying, my child wants to be a doctor, they're going to be a doctor, and we're going to prep for medicine. It's a heavy weight to carry for 4 years of high school. So you're saying, what is the next step for this child? And I'm curious, what is the next step for that child? What does that child want to do or think they want to do?
Well, there's a couple of things. So, and my profession before it became the homeschool mom world is interior design. And
Beautiful.
so right
Love it.
now, my oldest is partaking in that a couple of days a week, where
Yeah.
they're able to go out with experienced designers and learn all of those trades and all of the things. And so it's giving just kind of like job shadowing experience. And
Mhm.
then for my older two, we've talked about how things change. It changed for me when I was in high school and then when I went into university and all of those things. I know that that idea of, where you want to go and where you end up are different.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at like business degrees right now, just kind of like that generality of MBAs or something to that effect. And then when you get there and you start to really see what's available, then you can start to narrow your
Yeah.
search. But right now, we're still pretty broad,
Yeah.
because my oldest is from interior design all the way to like forensic science. So
Yeah.
there's a big,
Yeah.
spread there.
Yeah, I know, I've heard that so many times. And when I'm discussing, a couple of my kids' interests or even mine, but I remember one of my kids, she was going into ballet. So, 6 months before she graduated high school, we thought she was going into sciences. She'd always talked about medicine. That's why I brought that up. and her dad's a doctor, so she has an idea about all this world. And so she was headed into that. She did all the prereqs to create the portfolio, and I was looking into admissions, or talking with admissions officers in various post-secondary schools, and should we do SATs, should we do portfolio interview, how are we going to approach this, because we really did a very off-the-grid education for her. And then 6 months before, she's like, I want to do ballet. And we're like, okay.
Oh
Yeah,
my goodness, that's wonderful. Did she continue to pursue that?
she's right in the mix of going, okay, what should I do now? Yes, she did. And so in the fall, or in the winter, she didn't come home. By the way, I highly don't recommend encouraging them to ballet, because they don't come home for Christmas, because they're
Oh,
doing the Nutcracker.
it makes
Yeah,
sense.
but she very much is doing the thing that she wants to. And even still, whether it's her or a 50-year-old like me or whoever, we're always like, what is the next step? And is it possible for us to do the next step right now?
Mhm.
Because we're not always going to stay the same. And that's definitely the case of whatever you hear coming out of your kid's voice when they're in any age whatsoever. They might
Mhm.
shift, they might shift. But so your next step right now, as equipping your kids, is to determine what exactly do they need in their portfolio, or if you're doing a high school diploma based on your state. I'm not sure how that is for you specifically in your state, but you have to achieve certain things in order to apply to a certain college or university. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. And we are looking at the universities for that guidance so
Yeah.
that we kind of have an idea. So my middle might go in for engineering.
Yeah.
And so there are certain things that we're putting in place to allow that to be a little bit easier if they go in that direction.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely a situation where we have all of our documents put
Yeah.
down, and then we allow the three of them to be very open with what they want to
Yeah.
study.
Yeah.
And definitely the idea of the rabbit trails happens all of the time for us. So it's like, I'm really interested in this and I want to know more because I'm trying to instill that lifelong love of learning
Yeah.
rather than the lifelong idea of I just have to get it done.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's so true. And so, when people talk with me about how do I motivate my child, I'm like, you can't. Like that motivation does truly come from within. And if we really believe that, then we have to ask ourselves, why are we trying to, force this? They need to be motivated in a certain direction. Having said that, I'm with you. There's some things that you still need to do. Not a require, or it's not an option to drive on the left side of the road where we live. It's not a thing. And so you do have to align. I remember listening at a homeschool conference to someone that did a very out of the box education that didn't end up with a high school diploma at the end. And he became a lawyer, and he said that he did all the things that he needed to do in high school. Most of it was outside the box and following his rabbit trails. But when he decided to go into law, then he decided to become the student he needed to be and to check off the boxes.
Mhm.
And that really stuck with me. But I also personally had the experience of I graduated from a traditional high school because that was literally the only thing that my family would even have entertained at the time. Homeschooling wasn't even something I think any of us thought about.
Mhm.
And so then I did that, but I intended to go to one college, then decided to shift to a different college, then decided I wanted to do nursing, and then realized I did not have the prereqs from high school. And they had a conversation, an interview with me, even though I had a high school diploma. They said, well, you still need to do high school level math or chemistry. And I'm like, please no, I don't want to go back. but but I had to, and so I chose chemistry. And I really did well in that class because I was motivated to get into the program. So I learned to be a student for that program.
Yes. And I feel like that's probably the most important thing when we're looking into our kids' hearts
Yeah,
is what motivates them
yeah,
every day. So, where is their passion? Where does it lie? And how can I fuel that for them? And so, instead of just looking at, okay, so here's your workbook, here's your work pages, which absolutely we have to do those sometimes, but it's not all of the time. there are times when we can take that break in our day and say, okay, let's go off into this situation and let's
Yeah.
figure this out and let's do this and that. It gives them a little bit of that driver's seat
Yeah.
so that when they finally do get to a place where they're hyper focused and motivated, that they know what to do with that energy.
Yeah. You know, both of us, where I'm at right now, I should say, with my kids, is that they're in that college age level. And I am seeing common threads right from early stages of parenting or mothering. What you just spoke to was that allowing them to be in the driver's seat. And in my experience, early mothering, perhaps it's the community or the culture that I was in, but authoritarian parenting was in. That was cool. And now I've come away from that, not because I'm against any particular parenting. I'm all about whatever works for you still, even in parenting. And I read all the books and I had my ideas of what it was supposed to be, but I came to understand that we are their mothers or their fathers, we're their parents, but we are their guides. We can be their coaches, we can be their mentors, we can be their facilitators for many things, but we still are not them, and they're living their separate lives outside of us. And even from the young ages, they start to show independence and all those things that you're like, could you not, because this is interfering with my intentions here. Or I've got plans for you, and they're really good plans. So like, let's just do it together. And anyways, it turns out they're separate individuals, and they grow in that individuating thing. Especially, I noticed, no matter what age or gender, somewhere around 12 to 16, something like that, where you're like, whoa, what's going on? There's more pushback. If you're reactive, they're counter reactive. There's just a lot of individuating. I think you used the word, I forget the word, but there's like a certain kind of energy where you're like, oh, they're trying to be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have a choice but let them be in the driver's seat, because they're going to be like either attached to having you in the passenger seat for your entire life
Mm-hmm.
as they're driving, or else they're going to say, Mom, the door is open, it's 10 kilometers an hour, and you are out. Some of
Right.
the kids, one of four at least.
And I definitely always want to be along for the ride when they are in that driver's seat. So, our intentions as parents, we dream big and we think big for our little ones.
Yeah.
And then they get into their own voices because you see their personalities when they're babies and toddlers and, younger children. And then they start to get to the preteens. And it kind of follows them, what you saw as babies.
Absolutely.
And you can offer them the knowledge that you have because you've been there since the beginning
Yeah.
of, I see this in you, so let's explore this path together, rather than just handing them off to their own devices and their own thoughts. It's like, let's figure this out together and let's figure out how to turn this into something that's beneficial.
Yeah.
That type of situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting relationship, I think, because I don't know what your experience was, but mine was very much, okay, they're going to be along for my life ride and we're going to do cool, fun things, or I'm going to do something for them, to them, with them, but not I'm going to learn from them and they're going to go live their separate lives outside of my experience. That wasn't on my mental radar at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely we do have to give them that room to have their ideas in their life, but at the same time, always have us as that leaning wall,
Yeah.
where they can come and lean and think and talk it out
Yeah.
and have an opportunity to be
Yeah.
safe and then venture back out. It's kind of like when you're teaching them to swim, you do it a little at a time. You don't just throw them into the deep end. And your biggest hope is when they're adults, they always come back to that leaning wall,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So, I know for myself that I could talk a lot about the teenage years, the high school years, the parenting things, because I actually think that stuff is probably more important. This one thing, if I leave anybody with this one thing about moving into the high school years to prep for a college or post-secondary thing, it would be, you don't have to panic that they're not going to get it all done by the time, I don't know, some person that you know who has a kiddo that's graduating the same year, that they're going to be graduating the same time. Like it's just this made up construct, just like when we tell ourselves as homeschool parents, but I'm behind. Behind what? It's still behind what,
Mhm.
even at 8. And though it might be uncomfortable for them to have to explain why they're not doing something, the reverse might be that they grow in their independence and their confidence to stand as a single separate person too.
Right. And a friend mentioned to me the other day that you're always going to be in front of and behind someone,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And so it's a good way to open your perspective and how to adjust your
Yeah.
expectations of what is happening in your homeschool day by day,
Always.
and so as we venture off into the 10th grade, it feels like it's just rushing toward us. You start to think like dual enrollment.
Yeah.
When is that a good time to introduce that? Do I want my child, in college and in, you know what I mean, in both of those worlds?
I think
Or
there's always going to be, it depends on the child.
mhm,
It depends.
yeah, for sure.
I asked a couple of my kids that, and they're like, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to do that. One of my kiddos, by the way, we don't have dual enrollment in Canada.
Oh,
Um, I live in a small town. I have enough chutzpah, and I contacted the admissions chair and I said, my daughter would like to take an English class. And they asked me details about her. And then they said, oh, yeah, for sure, she can enter the high school English class. And I said, that's not what I
mm,
meant. And so then we had another conversation with someone a little higher up in the English department. And then I explained the scenario. She still had to take like an English proficiency exam somewhere to show them that she was capable. There still were certain things she had to check off. But then she went to the English class, took a history class. But not every child's going to choose that.
right.
And yeah.
And
And yeah.
and
Tell
that's,
me what, yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, and that's definitely the dynamic where that prep work that you lay as your foundation, especially if they do want to go off into higher education, you want to make sure that when they go and they approach those universities, that they are prepared. We want to have the, autonomy that we do in our homeschool, but at the end of the day, it is their situation and future that we're looking
Yeah.
to propel them into.
Yeah.
And so it's such a fine line that we're walking all of the time when it comes to homeschooling, making sure that we feel confident in what we're doing. They feel engaged and they feel illuminated when they're learning. And then we also are prepping for that, ever fast approaching future that's coming. And so it's definitely a fun but big process.
You know what? Everything you share online and how you're speaking right now, I'm confident you will figure it out and they will as well. And you will have them prepared. And you really are. I can hear it. You are ready. The next step is unknown to all of us, but you are prepping the steps. It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to share with you a big stack of books that I
Oh,
used for research because I think you must be like me in the research.
mm-hmm.
And I spent a solid 2 years researching homeschooling before I did, take a little step off the beaten path. And I'm not telling people that they need to do that. We all have different, I don't know, capacities for the unknown is probably it. And so I did a ton of research and I'm glad I did because it made me more confident.
Mm-hmm.
And also a lot of it was highly unnecessary. All at the
No, no.
just like the way you're describing your daytime or your scheduling, I'm like, yeah, I did that. I did all of that. I bought the big old SAT book and said, here, you should study this. And she never did need to do the SATs, and other kids had different paths. Um, when I first, I think what I didn't get with the first kiddo when she graduated was it was really tough. Actually, that entire journey going into high school, it's a sign that you are shifting relationship with your child. And it's kind of excruciating, at least coming from my perspective, because it's a letting go,
Mhm.
and it's a practice in letting go. And this is probably the least exciting part of this discussion. I found it really hard. It felt like birthing a person into the world, and they were excited, as they should be. I was not so much. There's some part of me that would love to keep them home forever, and the other part of me definitely does not. But I would probably want them to come back, actually. I would have said that way back in the day. But I think the relationship that you have with the kids is the most important. Everybody says it, but it's true. And I would recommend this Gordon Neufeld's book, Hold On to Your Kids.
I've seen
Yeah,
that one.
you've seen that one. I actually got it.
Haven't read it yet. I need to.
It's so good. It's so good. It's on repeat in my Homeschool Mama book club because it's really good. And he's
Hmm.
not actually, he's not a homeschool advocate. He's not anti-homeschooling either, though. He definitely shifted that direction in the pandemic. But his oldest daughter was a guest on my podcast, and she homeschooled her kids. So it's super interesting to learn her perspective as the daughter of this Gordon Neufeld, which many people know. Unschool to university. Even if you have zero intention to unschool, this is kind of like John Taylor Gatto or John Holt for the high school homeschool mom. The author is Judy Arnell, and she is now a graduated homeschool mom of 5 who unschooled her kids, and I think four of her 5 kids went on to engineering. So go
John
figure.
Holt was one of the first ones I read in my homeschooling journey.
Beautiful. Wasn't that energizing, enlightening, all the things?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I started with this one, not kidding.
Oh.
And I love her, and I have to be careful because now that anyways, I love her and I love all her ideas. And this is a lot of private school training in my experience. It certainly does help us understand an awful lot about generally the transitions that kids move from one stage to the next and how they're processing learning and things. And there's loads of ideas. If you ever wonder, could I build a unit study on my own, just read this book in your spare time.
That's
You have
wonderful.
that spare time.
Right.
But it is an amazing book. I went from that book to picking up John Holt's book on Lark, and I was like, oh, like massive shift. Then there is The Art of Self-Directed Learning by Blake Bowles, and these little books, it's a tiny little book, but it's a really engaging little book, and he's still kicking around having conversations with people about self-directed learning, and it also is kind of like modern day version of John Holt.
Yes.
And let's see, I've got The Ultimate Guide to Homeschooling Teens by Deborah Bell. And it gives you loads of ideas of other homeschool kids' experiences. But of course, you're going to have kids that didn't make it into a book, and the stories are nothing like those kids. You're going to have your own experience. Then there's Homeschooling the Teen Years by Kathy Cohen, CAFI. Those are it's just all really good research. And but the one book I want to mention, this gal is no longer present on social media, only in the last 6 months, but she was a huge benefit to me in figuring out how to create a portfolio and credits and figure out how to do all the practical kind of stuff to actually get into a post-secondary school. I don't know if you've heard of Lee Binns, Leebi,
I think I might have.
and said the Homescholar Guide to College Admission and Scholarships. And so this is for the United States. And yeah, I had the chutzpah to go through this and say, well, we could do this in Canada. And actually, it turns out my oldest didn't want to. She was like, I would like to go to school. And I said, but I am a homeschool advocate, and I don't think we do that. But anyways, I have a big story that I share on my podcast about that, because that was a massive shift for me to say, could my child do something that everybody else is doing? Is that okay if they really want to do that? Anyways, that is my own personal growth journey. But what I did, and I can do this in the Homeschool Mama support group as a customized workshop, is to actually help you understand how many hours you need typically, because it depends on the college or the university, but how many hours you'd need for credits and what kind of hours would qualify for credits. I can also tell you that Vicki Tillman from the Homeschool High School podcast is a career coach for high school kids moving into the college years. And she's replete with ideas. She was my mentor, natural mentor through her podcast. Are you familiar with Vicki too?
I'm not.
No.
I haven't heard her podcast,
I
unfortunately.
think I'm going to bring her back in the first Tuesday of every month. I'm going to talk about homeschool high school stuff. And if you know anybody that's focused on homeschool high school, let me know, because I know there's so very few.
Yeah.
And I want to have the conversation so people feel as confident in the K to 9 years as they can from the grade 9 to 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you want me to speak to? Because, clearly this could be a very long life.
Right. Well, definitely the experience that Vicky has, I think, would be such a pot of gold for so many of us that are trying to figure out that transition period from, the academic world into the university world. And it's, because I definitely have started my portfolio and getting all the things together with transcripts and, the course descriptions and all the things. But career building, I think, is something that I don't see a lot, talking to kids about the careers and just getting out there and experiencing them, kind of like my oldest is doing.
Yeah.
Getting out there a couple of times a week to really see what the world looks like.
Yeah.
And so it's been such a wonderful, enlightening experience to get out there and to be around adults who enjoy their profession, enjoy their craft, and, have a lot of grit in their day. And so it's definitely speaks volumes when my oldest gets back and is just, fresh with information from having spent a day out working.
Yeah. I love that. I would have loved that myself at that age. I built a house, so I thought that was kind of cool. I was really young doing interior design too. Did you love doing that when you were little?
Well, I grew up with, on my side of the family, in construction.
Yeah.
And so my husband grew up in interior design, and we used to joke that I could build it, he could decorate
Nice.
it.
Oh.
And then it kind of got into the interior design aspect of it after some time. But yes, it's always been a passion, and it's, something that I do all of the time, constantly changing spaces and updating them. And I love to do it on a budget.
Yeah, said everybody. Yes. Well, actually, no, but homeschool moms.
Right, exactly.
Well, if I could leave you with 5 tips for homeschooling high school, it would be to help them foster that independence and learn about time management. If they are declaring to you that they'd like to go toward a post-secondary education, because I don't think it's a requirement, even though I am, and I'm married to someone that is, and I see the value in it, but I also think there's a lot of options to create jobs out of, things that aren't jobs yet. Like, for instance, what I'm doing. What I'm doing wasn't a thing, I don't think, 5 years ago. So, we can make our own jobs, and becoming entrepreneurial is definitely a natural extension of being a homeschool family, typically. Not just an entrepreneurial, though. You could go down the trades route if kids really love doing certain things. There's so many possibilities. But whatever the case, foster the independence, help them, as you said, be in the driver's seat more, practice it, because they're going to anyway, with or without, you in the car, they're going to do it. And then the second thing is, like you said, plan ahead, mostly for your peace of mind, I would say, but then hold those plans loosely. because that's the reality of our mothering experience. Then, of course, and I think this might be the biggest tip, the third of the fifth tips is to live purposefully today. So whatever, just like your child is energized by what she is doing right now and is loving that. And that is where you want them to be at 30 and 50 and 75. And that means you don't know what's going to happen in their path or their journey, but you're going to tell them it's okay. It's good for you to follow the thing that you were meant to do, whatever it is right now. So living purposefully. And as you said, or as we spoke to earlier, leaning into child-led learning. So they will live adult-led lives, intentional lives. And the last thing is, as you already shared, that each child is unique. And there isn't one right way to homeschool, and there isn't one right way to homeschool high school. And if you think there is, you're probably on the wrong account.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was a joy.
Yeah, it really was. It was super fun. And it is so exciting because when you start watching your kids move into their path or in their direction, it's so exciting. You're like, oh yeah, I could have seen her do that when she was 7. And then yeah, the sky's the limit. The world is their oyster. It was a
Yes.
pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes, you too. And to everybody, if you'd like to have more conversation about homeschool high school, I'm going to come here every first Tuesday of every month, but every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to join with a homeschool mom that's serving in the homeschool community and help you to learn a little bit more about them. I'm going to head over to my Facebook group, the Homeschool Mama Support Group, and talk about kids bickering and the most fun parts of homeschool. My podcast episode today that came out is how to not lose your mind as a homeschool mom. I know what's at the top of your list, but for me, it was bickering and complaining and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Lots of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.